It's Thursday, May 28th, 2015. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight on the Geeknights Book Club, Watership Down.
Land car up.
Let's do this. So yeah, we'll be real brief on the news and all the stuff that won't make sense 20 years from now to get right into the book club part. But stuff's happening, usual stuff. But I'm going to try to make a vow to you guys this summer. We've been known for the last several years talking a lot about biking in the city. I am going to try to tell not one anecdote about some fixie guy that I run afoul of for the entire summer on Geek Nights.
Did you run into a fixie guy today?
Well, I didn't bike today. But yesterday.
It's not summer yet. Oh, he's got you.
All I'll say is this. The second funniest thing in the world is fixie guys having to walk their bike up a not that steep incline because they literally cannot bike up those inclines. That's pretty funny.
The third funniest thing is when they stand up and go,
yeah,
and get up the incline.
And the fourth funniest is when they do that to pass you and they look back at you like, see how much faster I am, and then you just pass them because they slow down. But the funniest thing that many people don't always realize, because some people have fake fixies, is that a real fixie bike, a fixed gear bike, cannot coast. So the pedals are always moving like a kid's tricycle.
Yep. If the wheels are moving, the pedal is moving.
So those people, not only do they walk their bike up the Williamsburg Bridge, but then they have to walk it back down because they literally cannot bike down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
It is so beautiful to behold.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to pointedly, I ran afoul of a fixie person who was walking the bike down the hill, but still in the bike lane, blocking the bike lane. So I dinged at him, and he jumped on his bike and chased after me to yell at me. And I looked back at him, and I basically said something to the effect of, "It's a shame you're in a children's bike, or you might be able to catch me." And then I biked off, and he yelled again a whole bunch, but then I never saw him again. That is my last fixie story for the entire of this summer.
He's going to tell a story if I got a 1-speed next.
Yeah.
But it's a non-fixed 1-speed.
The next time I bump into a fixie person who's not a fake fixie, like if they just have a single gear bike and they antagonize me, I guess I can impinge upon their hipster cred by disparaging the fact that they have a fake fixie, that they're a faux fixie biker.
The thing I don't understand, right? So I had a coworker, and he was asking he wanted a bike, and he's asking, right? And
like a Trek 7.3.
I say the same thing I say to everyone. It's got to be comfortable, otherwise you're not going to ride it.
Yep.
You have to like it, otherwise you're not going to ride it. It should have brakes, and it should have some number of gears. Even 3 gears is enough in the city, right?
Yeah, the hub gear is okay. It's not
gonna
great.
get you up the hill, right? If you don't care about biking, that's enough. I mean, 10 is more. I have like 21 combinations. Some of them are identical, effectively, because it's the same ratio. But
Yep.
I don't use even a fraction of all of those. I use mostly maybe 6 different combinations, right? Like 3 speeds for different hills, and 3 speeds are going fast and normal. That's pretty much it. So that's what I told. But it's he's one of those people who's worried, it's got to be perfect. So everything, I'm I'm just some bikes have comp gears and some of them have regular. He's like, oh no, which one did I get? And I'm like, it just doesn't matter. Don't.
You know what it is? Remember way back there was that TED Talk on if you give someone too many choices and they're not good at living, then they'll be less satisfied with any choice.
Right. It's he really just needed to make sure, every option he knew about, it's he felt like you had to make the right one. And I'm
Scott,
it doesn't matter which one.
I bump into that a lot, and I actually figured out a good way around it. So here's how you
tell people about these options.
No, yeah. Here's what you tell people like that. And I've learned when I give advice to never offer all that information I have about, there's 4 different kinds of brakes. Instead, what I just ask them a couple questions, like what kind of biking do you want to do or whatever. And then I sort of say, I'm a bike expert. You want to get this bike with this brake option and this thing.
just make the decision for them.
Yes, I just make the decision for them because you know what? Otherwise, they're never going to buy a bike.
Right, but one thing that really bothered me was he's like, I'm thinking about getting a 1-speed, because it's so simple.
Wow.
And I'm like, seems to
I'm
be...
thinking about getting a 486 because it's so simple.
That's what I'm saying, is people were like, if for some reason with bicycles, there's this attitude of we want simplicity, right? It's simplicity is a good thing.
Yeah,
and
like
I'm
a derailleur
And
is-
I'm like, oh, well, why don't you go use an Apple II? Because it's a lot simpler than that MacBook.
Why don't you have a dumb
Why don't
phone?
you go
Well,
get a
where's
model?
your feature phone? Where's the feature phone?
Why don't you get a Model T Ford? Because it's way simpler than that other car, right? And it's like, I think the problem that bicycles have, the reason people want them to be simpler is because if you look, people like an Apple compared to, say, a PC
Yep.
is not because it is simpler. It's because the complexity, they can't see it. If you made a MacBook with a transparent case so you could see all the bullshit inside, people would be like, fuck that noise. They wouldn't like it. It's because a bicycle cannot hide its gears, right? Because it doesn't look
No,
simple.
I think it's much simpler than that. I think it's like when an old person sits at a computer and says, I can't computer, and they don't even like look at the screen. Because I would say...
But this person hasn't even looked at anything yet.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
They for some reason, when it comes to bicycles, they prioritize simplicity. But when it comes to other things in life,
Next
they don't.
time someone does that, ask them a simple question and be a jerk to make sure they answer it. Ask them if they know how to shift gears on a bike. Because I am really convinced that the vast majority, like 95% of the people biking in New York City, if the gears shift from one gear to another, it's entirely by accident, and they have never used those shifters because if all they know is if they move the shifter a little bit, the gears start making a bunch of noise and they're worried they're going to break it. I'm pretty sure people stay in whatever gear the bike was in when they got the bike.
There's a lot of people on like bicycling Reddit who like one speeds and like fixies despite clearly knowing how gears work and how to use them.
Oh, those people are a special kind of moron because they always make the same arguments. They always say it's easier to repair and maintain, which isn't true at all.
Well, I mean, it is true in the sense that
Well, except you're
yes, you will have a problem with a derailleur that is a good one once every 20 years. That'll be one in time in 20 years. Your bike won't break if it's a 1-speed.
I used to mountain bike
It's
constantly.
an inconsequential, insignificant difference of
in the
reliability.
thousands and thousands of crazy miles I've done on bikes over the years, I have never had a problem with a derailleur.
My bike has 4,000 miles on it and has more gears than are necessary, and it has no problem.
I've had problems with the brake line snapping, which, that's the same thing can happen to a fixie.
I had to replace the tires and make the brakes tighter and change the brake pads, and that's it.
I've had to replace tires before, but you
Yeah.
know what? The people who want that simplicity, they always have the rims. They're actually super complicated and difficult to get the tires off and replace.
Well, they don't do it themselves.
Well, if they're not doing it themselves, why do they care about the simplicity?
Because they just have these stupid ideas. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's weird because I see so
Is
many
it the same
fixies,
attitude that makes them not want to eat genetically modified food?
but I also see so many people who don't have fixed gear bikes but ride them like they're fixed gear bikes and never change gears ever or don't know how to change gears. Which actually that sentiment, many people that we know, it has been revealed over the years that despite biking a lot, they had no idea how gears worked on bikes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to do about that. And it's not car stuff. I mean, I knew how gears worked on a bike long before I knew cars had
I knew how gears worked on a bike in 5th grade.
Yeah, I got my first geared
I
bike.
had a 10-speed bike. It had 2 in the front and 5 in the back. And I said, ooh, there are things on here that my previous bike didn't have. What do they do? And someone told me, like, I clicked them and nothing happened. And they're like, you have to click them while you're moving. So I started moving and I clicked it. And I said, oh, I understand now.
Clicking, really? Because usually back then, most bikes had a continuous like lever shifter.
It was, but it still clicked, right? It was a lever that moved from top to bottom, but it would actually stop.
That's
as you
kind of
moved it.
fancy.
Whatever.
Mine did not click. Mine was just a continuous like whoop whoop.
It's like you would push it from 1 to 2, and it would slightly smooth, but when it got to 2, it would stop a little bit.
So anyway, in the what? Okay, I just got a weird email. Anyway, so in the news, something interesting happened, and it's interesting enough to where I actually want to talk about it on a Thursday on the lounge, even though it's a book club episode.
Sure.
The U.S. state of Nebraska, which is traditionally pretty conservative,
It's basically a place they grow corn.
just abolished the death penalty.
But if
and
it's so
commuted all the sentences of everyone on death row, which was 10 people, to life sentences.
if it's so conservative, why would they do such a liberal thing?
So, this is where it actually gets really interesting. Not only did they abolish it, but the Senate in the state. The state only has one legislative body. It's the Senate.
All right.
It's majority Republican.
Yep.
The Senate voted to abolish the death penalty.
What was the vote?
The governor vetoed it.
And the Senate
Senate overrode his veto.
Okay.
Which is already getting a little bit crazy.
Yeah, that hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm guessing the governor is also Republican.
So, yeah. And also, the governor seems to be a really, really shitty person.
Which governor is not a shitty person?
Should have been Zephyr Teachout.
But that's not. I'm saying which
Zephyr Teachout was running for governor.
Which governor of any state ever was not a piece of shit?
So here's what Mr. Ricketts said when they overrode his veto to a huge degree.
They should just put him on death row.
My words
Like,
cannot express how appalled I am that we have lost a critical tool to protect law enforcement and Nebraska families. While the legislature has lost touch with the citizens of Nebraska, I will continue to stand with Nebraskans and law enforcement on this important issue. The only people in the state who are for this are cops and this governor and a handful of Republicans. Now,
why are these other people against it? That's the only important question.
This is the first
talking about all this other
conservative
meaningless bullshit.
that has done this since like the 70s.
You keep talking about meaningless bullshit. Why are these people voting against what is their party line?
So this is how it's fucked up. The Democrats were against it because they're against the death penalty.
Obviously.
Some of the Republicans are also against the death penalty, and because it's state level politics, you can get away with having an opinion like that, like it won't matter.
But why are they against it?
Well, some of them, I can get into that, well, like the Democrats, are just against the death penalty fundamentally, like for philosophical reasons. The rest of them are against it because it's too expensive and they're trying to reduce government spending.
That's fine.
And one of them said it's horrifying the way he said it, but he basically said that he's in favor of the death penalty, but Nebraska just isn't getting its bang for its buck when it comes to executing people, so we should save the money and just not even try to kill people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He used the phrase, not getting our bang for our buck, in reference to the death penalty. So part of this seems to be about the fact that the companies that make the drugs they use in lethal injection are basically not making them anymore.
But aren't those people like bribing the government to make them be pro-death penalty?
No, so basically, no, they're not. They don't want a lot of the ways we use, like the chemicals we use to execute people, the people who make them won't sell them to a state that has the death penalty because they don't want it to be used for the death penalty. So
aren't chemical manufacturers generally pretty conservative?
Nah, not this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So they don't actually have current certified versions of the chemicals to do it. So they have to change their laws to come up with a different method. And it's all just so expensive. So the Republicans were against it for financial reasons and not for human reasons.
All right, well, whatever.
Logistical difficulties with lethal injections. And I don't think they have their electric chair anymore. And they've already...
Yeah, I'm surprised. Why don't they just switch to hanging or guillotine?
Because they'd have to change their laws to do that.
But it's like, a guillotine is actually like a good thing in a way, not because it's good to guillotine people or kill people, right? But because the people if you're killed by a guillotine, it's actually, a painless way to go.
Well, that's debatable.
As long as it's a very nice and sharp one.
Wasn't there that famous old experiment during the French Revolution where the guy was awake for like 20 seconds?
It's got to be a sharp one.
No, his head was awake for like 20 seconds.
You could also do the method where you have a boulder and you crush the person's head. Anyway, but it's also good because it's so gruesome, it forces the horrible people who support the death penalty to like be face to face with how horrible it is.
Here's the problem.
So that they're forced to not be for it.
Being face to face with it might just go back to medieval times where kids cheered in the street and threw tomatoes at the dancing guy.
I don't think modern people could stomach.
Modern people are not different from medieval people.
As soon as they saw one, they'd be like, shit.
No, but then they see 10, because
Also, the law, when it comes to like, executing people, right, in the United States, nobody's forced to look, right? It's like sometimes they'll let you look if you want, but nobody's forced to look. You should be, if there was a death penalty, like you couldn't just not have it, which is the right way to go. Certain people should be forced to see it. Anyone, the lawyer who is prosecuting the person, anyone, like, let's say it was a murder trial and like your relative got murdered and you were like pushing for the murderer to get the death penalty, you should be forced to watch. Any politician who voted for the death penalty to be like legal should be forced to watch every time.
So anyway, here,
and
look.
If any of those people aren't there to see it or closing their eyes, then they don't do it.
Here's a quote from the article. Across the country, efforts to execute criminals on death row have stalled in the face of backlash against the death penalty in liberal states and logistical difficulties with the drugs. Many states have had difficulty obtaining lethal injection drugs as European manufacturers, who apparently make the majority of these, setting moral and ethical objections,
of course,
have refused to sell them to prisons in the United States. Texas?
Aren't there American manufacturers?
No. And the few that are have the same problems.
All right.
Also, it's hard to find doctors who are willing to violate the Hippocratic Oath and kill people like that.
There were doctors doing it? I thought it was just like executioners.
No, there's so many laws about it.
The hangman.
Yeah, so at least lethal injection.
Isn't it someone's
Texas,
job to be the hangman?
which executes more inmates than any other state.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's more people in Texas
has
that
enough drugs to carry out one more execution.
All right.
And they can't get more. So the death penalty is actually like at this tipping point where the U.S. might end up abolishing it completely, partly because liberal states are banning it on human reasons, and equally partly because conservative states are finding it too expensive to keep doing it.
But it's like, here's the thing I don't understand, right? It's like, can't imagine Obama for all of his, whatevers, right? He probably doesn't support the death penalty. I don't imagine he does.
It's
right?
probably a state issue, remember, Congress has to do it, not him.
But no, he could just pardon anyone who's on death row. Regardless, if I was the president, that's the fuck I would do.
And
I'd
then
be
you know
like,
what would happen?
They'd be like, that person murdered 20 people. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to murder one person, so pardon or don't kill them. That's your choice. I'm going to pardon them. I'm about to sign it. Fix it. Up. Pardon. Too late.
So interestingly, two things I learned a while ago that I just thought of recently. You cannot pardon someone before they've been convicted. Not relevant here.
Obviously.
But the reason for that is you could pardon a hitman. So anyway, but in terms of the pardoning stuff, politically, it would destroy the Democrats. It turned into a Willie Horton all over again.
I don't know who Willie Horton is.
You should learn about old politics.
I don't need to know about that.
Anyway, you got any short news before we talk about rabbits?
I do have a news. So here's some actual interesting thing, right? Is that FIFA, who is known to be, the people who run soccer worldwide, have known to be wicked corrupt for a long time. And their extreme corruption is bringing the World Cup to Qatar, or however you want to pronounce it, Qatar, however.
I say Qatar.
I say Qatar, but everyone else seems to be saying Qatar. I don't really care. Sorry, Qatar. Anyway, so yeah, there's all sorts of horrible slave labor type conditions to build soccer stadiums there. And there's all kinds of other issues like no one can play soccer in a desert. It would suck. And you would probably just pass out on the field because you had to play soccer for like 90 minutes straight without stopping.
Yep. Now, no one knew about this except people who pay attention to things in the world until John Oliver was like, hey, look at this.
But that was like a year ago. And the thing is, I knew about it even before that. Everyone,
Well, because you pay attention to stuff. Well, you pay attention to inconsequential stuff.
It's even more corrupt than the Olympic Committee. So the U.S., some Justice Department or whatever, actually was like, we're going to go and get these corrupt FIFA people, and they have a case on them, but they had to get them. Apparently, they were in Switzerland, and Switzerland, despite usually not doing this kind of thing, arrested them and extradited them.
Actually, Switzerland will happily do it. The only thing Switzerland won't extradite for, specifically with our treaty, is tax stuff.
Yep, so if you evade U.S. taxes, you can go to Switzerland, and they will not send you to the U.S.
Exactly.
You can just stay in Switzerland, as long as your visa is
But if
good.
you run FIFA, they will totally send you back to the U.S.
Sure. So I guess they haven't won at soccer enough recently to make them want to. But here's the thing. Number one, they didn't go after the chief dude, Blatter. It's like, why not? And two, if you're so good at getting corrupt people, why didn't you just arrest every congressperson? Because they're all corrupt.
Because the Congress people are the
ones.
ones.
At least 99% of them are. They're not support. Congress people didn't say go start this investigation and arrest FIFA. They're not getting anything from this.
I actually think that this thing is going to be used by people as a campaign thing because I think people in the U.S. government have realized that if shows like John Oliver's thing actually do rile people up, if you take the issues that don't affect you or your constituents in any way and you risk nothing politically by acting on them in some fashion, or at least supporting or saying you support it in some fashion.
But this is just an action by like police. This isn't an action
Yeah, so
by
who drove
any
that?
congressperson.
Who started that? Who's the person who started the investigation, and where did he get?
Pretty sure it's been going on for a
his
while.
or her orders from. Yeah,
Probably
so,
going on longer before John Oliver said anything about it.
Maybe.
It takes
So-
a long time to build a case like
So
that.
let's see who ordered the report. See who ordered the investigation.
And I mean, someone's going after the Congress people in New York State too, right? They've been had 5 corrupt people in a row going down or whatever. So
well, the problem in New York State is that we generally, in the U.S. as a whole, we put the foxes in charge of henhouse security, and then we also put the foxes on the missing chicken investigation
But it's
committee.
like someone out there has the capability to find people who are guilty of bribes, corruption, etc.
Yeah, Batman.
And arrest them. And
Batman.
that person just did it. So why doesn't that person who arrested FIFA arrest all the Congress people?
Because they arrested foreigners and people who don't actually directly contribute to our bribe system.
But just do it anyway.
Yeah,
and then, like, if I was, say, the Attorney General of the United States, I would do that, and then I would run for president.
You know what happens,
Saying,
Scott?
I put all the bad Congress people in jail, vote for me.
You're going to run for president? It's not going to work out like Dave. It's going to work out like Bulworth.
That's fine.
You got to be a spirit. You can't be no ghost.
It'll be awesome. Also, even though I would go down, shit would be fixed because all those corrupt people would be on the not death row. Or they'd be on the death row if they voted for it.
So one last thing. If you live in New York, you probably know about Manhattanhenge, and if you don't, you might think this is a cool thing to do.
It's not cool.
There are some times in the year where the sunrise and sunset line up with these avenues on Manhattan Island.
This happens in other cities as well that have grid-like
Streets, not avenues, streets. It's
that
streets
have
it lines up
that
with.
have grid-like street structures and also tall buildings. The sun will occasionally line up with the road.
Here's the problem. Someone noticed this once a long time ago, and people were like, ooh, cool. And people would go to, there's a few places in the city where you can a really good view. People would go and be like, oh, that was cool. And then it became an internet thing. And now on those days, if you go
it's
to
only twice a year, right?
Yeah. If you go to Tudor City and try to anywhere near one of those streets on these days, there's a million tourists fucking blocking the street, and
all these photography people lining up with tripods and shit that they don't have permits for.
And you know what? Yeah, occasionally
news trucks, people standing on top of the news truck with cameras.
Occasionally you get a really good sunset.
Twice a year, everyone does this bullshit.
But it's not better than a normal awesome sunset. The sunset is not really that different. So look at these pictures. That is literally the best this event could ever be. Never fucking come to this island and try to look at it yourself in person, I
People
swear.
are starting to be like, oh, go to Queens and look across the whole island. And go to, why don't you go to Jersey and watch the sunrise? No one's doing that. Right? Yeah, because you don't want to go to Jersey, do you?
So anyway... Things of the day. Got a thing?
It's the simplest thing, but the quality is so high. This man is excellent at imitating various animals. Watch this video and listen to him imitate the noises various animals make in an expert fashion. I applaud you, good sir.
I'm glad this man has almost 1 million views. I'm very happy.
He
for this
deserves
man.
more than his 1 million views. Let's give him some more views.
So right now the Stanley Cup is in its final stages. There are
No,
two
it's
games.
not. It's one game away from
I
its
said
final
stages.
stage.
There is 2 stages left.
There's 8 stages.
Final stages.
Potentially 8 stages left.
The next 2 teams to win a game of hockey go on to the Stanley Cup, and the
Finals.
next team to win 5 games wins Lord Stanley's Cup. One of the teams that is do or die in getting into the final 4-win set is the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Now you might be thinking,
I
hey,
think they're the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim.
so you might be thinking to yourself, hey, wasn't that a Disney movie? It was 2 Disney movies.
It was more than 2, wasn't it? 3 or 4 Disney movies?
I don't know.
It was many Disney
I saw
movies.
the first 2 movies in the theater. I'll say
Whoa.
that. You didn't see D2?
I saw them at home. I didn't. On
I saw
VHS
Mighty Ducks in the theater.
Blockbuster or some shit.
D2, the plot of D2 is
Or
they all
cable.
forgot how to skate and hockey inexplicably the next year.
Pretty much.
So you might think well, wouldn't it be funny if the Ducks of Anaheim were named after the movie? Well, they are.
They were. They didn't exist until very recently.
They were
They're
created
owned
what,
by
92?
Disney. Disney owns
93? I think 92 they were that was set up.
Yeah,
in the expansion.
NHL made expansion teams. They said, hey, we're making brand new teams. People can buy, and Disney bought one and named it the Ducks.
So Disney made a hockey team
unapologetically
called the Mighty Ducks that actually had a pretty good mascot, which then they changed it so it's not the awesome Disney mascot they used to have.
Mm-hmm.
But their first game in 1993, the first game that this hockey team played, this is a team that has a chance to win Lord Stanley's Cup this year, put forth in an actual hockey game on the ice for a live audience for 15 fucking minutes, this shameless and ridiculous display.
It's basically Disney on Ice.
It's
and
Disney on Ice.
It's right near Disneyland,
where
so
they
plenty of performers are available to do this.
But it's what's his name? The candelabra from Beauty and the Beast.
That was what was hot at the time.
Skating
Disney-wise.
around
That was what Disney was doing when this team was created.
They rewrote a bunch of Disney songs to have derpy lyrics about dreams of power plays.
Because they only bought the team to promote Disney shit. They didn't, right? That was the original
They bring
intent.
out some Gary Glitter and a weird albino guy trying to pump up the crowd. And this is amazing to see. So Anaheim Mighty Ducks, all I say to you and fans of your team is to remember your shame.
Well, this is why New York sports teams are the best. Even ones I hate, like the Yankees. Well, I guess the Jets are shameless. But even the Yankees, if you go to a Yankees game, there's no mascots. There's no dancing Homa. There's no bullshit, right? You go there and you're there to watch the fucking game, right? You cheer at the game. You boo at the game.
What about Mr.
Maybe
Met? What about Mr. Met over at the Mets?
Mr. Met is special.
What? Oh.
Even Philadelphia, who I hate the most, the Philly Fanatic, gets an exception as well. Because the Philly Fanatic is perhaps, while it pains me to say it, the most talented and quality, Jim Henson designed mascot and most talented, etc. Right? Except Mr. Met. We just bash his head in with a baseball anyway. But yeah, we don't do right. All that kind of performance distraction shit is right? They call it fan appreciation stuff in the business, right? Because you run a sports team, and especially a baseball team. People come to your games. They might not be a big, huge fan, right? And baseball's pretty boring, especially compared to other sports. They're going to be pretty bored if all you have is baseball. So you need all this shit to keep kids entertained, to make it seem like a family-friendly place, and your team is losing and the game is meaningless. Why would you come here? Kids come with birthday parties, right? So you do a bunch of bullshit to, spice it up. And mostly people do that bullshit at minor league sports. Because minor league sports, nobody gives any fucks at all. Look at this barren field of fucks that they give. It is empty, low, right? So you need even more fan appreciation shit. At a New York Rangers game where every ticket is 100% sold out and costs $1,500 because someone cares that much about hockey, you don't got to do shit. No ice girls, no nothing. No bands, no mascots, no nonsense, right? Just play fucking hockey. We're going to watch it.
Anyway,
Zamboni
to move
comes
on,
out.
watch this, remember it, and remember that in the modern era, we're like big companies, when they do a thing, we expect really high production values, and we usually get them. This has really low production values, and it's like from the end
production
of that
value,
era.
I think, looks lower than you think it is because A, the technology of the 90s is
No,
lower.
you didn't watch it. It's not
the camera quality is lower.
No,
in those
forget.
things.
I'm not talking about any of that stuff. The quality of the skating, the quality of the choreography on that level, it's really sad. Like the albino guy who climbs up on the Zamboni, he kind of can't even do it, and he can barely work up the crowd. He's not better than the kinds of people who MC the cosplot at a convention.
Well, I mean, someone who gets a job doing the, I don't know, what's the bear hoedown thing at Disney World, right? It's like, you think that that person can sing and dance better than we can, but if they were really good, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah, but they might be on the ice at a hockey game.
Yeah.
It just, in general, when you watch things from the 80s and 90s that were live performances, there's this impression that they did it for the audience at the time and never expected that people would know about or watch it again. And the science and the craft of making really crass advertising things has gotten way better in the last 20 years.
Sure, whatever you say.
Yeah, look at the production values of some publicity stunt now compared to one from the 80s or 90s.
Looks the same crass shit to me.
But it's more well crafted crass
Sure,
shit.
if you say so.
It's better done. It works better probably too. In the Meta Moment, we are back on iTunes. Go subscribe. Also, review us on iTunes because the last reviews are from like 2006. Because no one uses iTunes anymore, apparently.
All right. Well, now it is a very important time. There's a very important Meta Moment happening, right? Our long-running yearly book club episode is happening.
Wow. Yeah, I guess God, what book did we read? How long has it been? When did we announce this book? Like 8 months ago?
It was too long.
I can find out exactly.
Well, when we discuss the book, we'll discuss why it took so long to read.
I guess you just can't read? Okay. October 20th, 2014 is when we announced this. So not a year. Didn't take a full year for you to read this book about rabbits.
Okay.
But it took you a long time, from October to the end of May.
Now, there are many reasons that it took that long, but I finished it today because I was on vacation.
Great. Let's see if I even remember
To get
because
this out of the way.
Because I read it like a week after we announced it.
But more importantly, there is the next book club now that you may begin. Oh, yes.
All right.
So, I was hanging out in a Barnes & Noble because I had to go to mentoring near Union Square and I had to kill some time between work and, right? So I was walking around the nerd book section looking at the nerd books, like you do. Not buying any, maybe taking a picture of one or two for Amazon, right? I think I saw that Patrick Rothfuss had a new horrible book of some kind. I took a picture, sent it to Rim, like, hey, did you know this existed? Whatever. And I was looking around and, of course, there's a big old display for the Games of Thrones, right? And I'm sitting there thinking about the Games of Thrones, and I'm like, this is really popular lately, but I've known about this way before it was popular, because I've been hanging out in nerd book sections of Borders and Barnes & Noble for, since high school, right? And there are many, many series of fantasy novels that are in the section of nerd books and sci-fi novels that are ridiculously big, and nerds know about them, but apparently non-nerds didn't know about Game of Thrones until a TV show existed, even though I knew and didn't care about it forever and still don't care about it. But that's the way it goes. So then I start looking around and I'm seeing all these other fantasy series that are pretty much in the same spot that Game of Thrones was in before there was a TV show. Like, I know about it. I know about it. All nerds know about it. It's a big time nerd series, right? That's super famous among nerds, but normal people give no fucks. They don't even know it's a thing. If a TV show was made about it, it would probably be a big fucking deal, right? And I'm like, you know what? Despite me knowing about most of these fucking things, right? And they're being super notable and whatnot, I really haven't read most of them, right? I'm reading Prince of Nothing, which isn't even known among the nerds, right? I'm not reading, I don't know, Alex usually reads most of them, right? So then I'm like, well, you know what? I need another book club book. What is the biggest and most famous of these that I have not read? And as a nerd, probably should have read at least one page of, right? Because, I've read more than one page of Harry Potter. That's probably the first one. But that one's known by non-nerds, so it doesn't count, right? What is the one that is where Game of Thrones was? Now, I found that one. It was very easy to find after walking around for about 2 seconds. And I said, do I really have to? As soon as I saw it, I was like, that's the one. There's no question that that's the one. But then I looked at it and I said, I really don't want to pick this because it has a problem.
What kind of problem does it have?
It has a problem of many pages. The many-page problem.
Many page? You give me shit about Dumas. You bring this garbage to me?
It has a Dumas level of pages, in fact. I don't know if it's quite Dumas level of pages. And I said, man, I really don't want to read that many pages. But at the same time, there was an equal force that said, but you're a nerd person. You must know what is written on at least the first book of these pages. At least. Otherwise, what kind of nerd are you?
Yeah, because I totally in no way regret reading the King Killer Chronicle, Captain Nice Guy's Penis Adventures Through Sex Land, The Fedora Legacy.
Well, it doesn't matter, because if you have not guessed it already, I have selected, for whatever consequence may befall me for making the selection.
Hop on pop.
I'm going to do it anyway. The book club selection is... Dun 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 dun. You going to insert a drum noise? The first book of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. The Eye of the World. It is 782 pages long. It
So,
is the
Scott,
most famous of nerd book series.
There's a heron blade. I know that.
I don't know what that is, but I don't care. Is it like a heron spear?
So
I don't know anything about it.
Here's what I know, Scott. I do not think you or I will like that book.
That is fine. It is so famous and nerdy that it must be done. We don't have to read the whole thing.
The rationale for that is that, one, most of my friends in high school who really liked this book were insufferable human beings.
That's possibly true.
And the people I knew in high school who were chill told me these books were bullshit and I shouldn't read them.
I believe it.
This is what you're doing to me.
That's what I'm doing.
I'm pretty sure one of our friends was recently talking about like misogyny in these books too.
I believe it. Why shouldn't I?
Okay, I don't see the word misogyny doesn't appear on the Wikipedia page.
Why shouldn't I believe it?
Yeah.
But it is a ridiculously famous and popular series of nerd books.
Great. Now we get to learn all about Teleronrioid.
We only have to read the first one. We don't have to read any of the other ones unless for some reason our expectation is different.
Scott, it's 300 and something pages. Well, it's book 0. I guess
That book 0 is not the one. It is book 1.
782 pages.
That is the one. What is the name of it?
The Eye of the World.
That's the one. It's time to read Wheel of Time.
Scott, I spent my whole life up to this point knowing this book existed and actively avoiding reading it.
There you go. That makes it even better. We can give Rim a taste of his own medicine.
What book have I ever suggested that wasn't good?
The medicine is Rim finds out that something annoys you, and then he repeatedly does it even though you tell him to stop. So you're trying to avoid this book, I'll make you read it. Even though I might have to suffer as well.
You might indeed, because it's been a while since I visited my friend Lecomte. Lecomte de Monte Cristo. And his magical revenge
and
machine.
Also, we keep picking books for book club that we, at least one of us likes, right? That has some positive quality to it that is known in advance.
Yeah, like the King Killer Chronicle was so positive.
I'm just saying.
Wait, you picked that one too, right?
For a similar reason.
That reason has not panned out so well.
No, it hasn't. If it doesn't pan out again, it'll be the last time I ever use that reason.
Because the only thing I can say about the King Killer Chronicles, had I not read the second book, I would have still thought of it as an okay fantasy book. The second one confirmed all my suspicions.
I bought the second one and didn't read it thanks to your warding away of danger.
But you don't see him go to the land of the gods and seduce the goddess of sex.
I don't need that.
Yeah, but that is a minor bump on his journey.
Also, I've looked at the covers of these Wheel of Time books, and there are way more dragons and swords and that sort of action.
They look
and
exactly like the covers to all the Forgotten Realms books.
Right, kings and wizards and all that good shit. So King Killer Chronicles didn't have enough of that.
Yeah.
It had more wizard school and less kings and emperors and wars and shit. So.
What about the Prince of Nothing? It's just a picture of a guy, usually.
Yeah, that doesn't have enough wizarding and
so unrelatedly,
dragoning either.
Way
it
back,
has some, but not enough.
I was like a couple days ago, I looked online to see if Art Scott Backers like any progress on the next book. And I noticed that someone had linked to me a while ago that there's a wiki about the Prince of Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like a really good one.
Yeah, it's been there for a long time.
And they had warned, I never actually went to it, but they'd warned me there's derpy art there, but don't look at it.
There is, yep.
So I went there like yesterday and I saw that art. Oh my gosh. That makes Wesnoth look like a AAA game.
Well, Wesnoth has improved a lot since you've played it.
All right, Wesnoth from the early 2000s.
Good guy. All right, so let's talk about the not watery, the dry upship.
What Watership Down? They literally get on a ship in the water.
They do.
That is like you think a book that has a name like that, like you don't really think about it too much, and then literally like the climax of the book is just that.
Yep.
So
I mean, I saw that coming anyway.
If you have not listened to the Geeknights book club before, we're going to spoil the book.
We haven't done one in a while. It's understandable. If
we
you
are
assuming
the point of the book club is that you already read the book.
You're got to be in the club, which means you've read the book. If you haven't read the book, you're not in the club. So why are you here?
So we're not going to waste any time explaining what happens in the book, telling you who the characters are. You probably read the book like 8 months ago, like I did, and you might forget who Clover was or something. But we're reviewing the book, not the movie. not the TV show.
I didn't even watch the movie. I didn't even know there was a TV show.
Yeah, the movie apparently is really good.
It might be.
It's one of those animated movies that's sitting on the shelf. It's like Disney Playtime, Harmageddon, Plague Dogs, this. It's one of those movies that parents would get for kids and not realize is actually pretty serious and scary.
Like Ferngully, but even more.
Well, way more. I mean, you read this book. Like, imagine that animated, like all that violence and death.
Like straight up?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Straight. In fact, the movie kind of takes it a little more violent and bloody, and you get a lot of animations of Fiverr's terrifying visions. So I picked this book because Emily and I have rabbits now, and I know a lot about rabbits that I did
If you
not.
had pet mice, were you going to pick Redwall?
I'm not a fan of. So
Mouse Guard?
The most important thing to think about. Why Watership Down I think is interesting to pick as a book club book, and why I think nerds and people in general should read it, is that a lot of people do stories of animals, but they're anthropomorphized.
Like Mouse
fantasy.
Guard.
Yeah, like Mouse Guard.
Not that Mouse Guard is bad. It's amazing. But
It is amazing, but there's a lot of that. But Watership Down, they're just rabbits. Like, they can't, other than sort of making up a drama and like dialogue, they don't do anything that rabbits could not do.
Right. This is the thing about this book that I think is the most positive thing about it, is that somehow it has, oh, who's calling me now? You can't call me now. On the one hand, it's a fantasy novel, right?
Yep, it's a hero's journey.
It's a straight up fantasy novel.
Well, it's a hero's journey or a stranger comes to town, depending on what direction you're
doesn't
looking.
matter, right? It follows the same sort of plot structure of fantasy novel, right? There's kingdoms, and there's wars, and there's adventures, right? And there's heroes and battles and all these kinds of things, right? On the other hand, it's totally straight up real biology of rabbits. Like, you learn how rabbits actually do, real rabbits actually do in the wild, and they, frequently explore and make plot points of true facts about rabbits. Like, yeah, rabbits, this is how they make babies, and this is how they eat, and this is the kind of things they like, and only the lady rabbits dig, and a rabbit that was taken care of as a pet is not really good to go out in the wild, and all these things actually matter for the plot, and you learn about rabbits at the same time. And if you already know about rabbits, the fact that those things are true is sort of like, ooh, they incorporated this thing I know.
Well, it also means, like, it doesn't explain everything.
Sort of like when you read a book about like something involving computers and the computer parts are actually true. Like, ooh, SSH, it's real.
But also, like, knowing a lot about rabbits, there's other things you can read into and pick up on that aren't necessarily apparent. Lots of neat little stuff. Like, it's pretty real, too. Like, the one rabbit, when they escape on the ship at the end, gets hit on the back just because they go into that bridge.
Yep.
And she just dies because that happens to rabbits.
Yeah, they were going pretty fast in the stormy river.
Yeah. But
I mean, if I was on a boat, think about you're in a little rowboat going down a river, it's raining, it's going kind of fast. There's a bridge, right? You duck, and the top of the bridge hits you in the back. That's going to hurt like a motherfucker. And if you're a little tiny rabbit, that's not good.
Yeah, but it's interesting, too, how the story has, like, when they're traveling in the beginning, the book does a good job of making it seem like an extreme distance, an extreme amount of time.
Well, occasionally they reference real locations in the real world.
Oh, it's set in a real place.
Right. So if you know those locations,
you can go look up a map.
Then you'll see exactly how far it is, and it's not that far. It's like
here's a picture of Nuthanger Farm.
Like, it's maybe 3 miles.
That's
right?
the farm right there.
Like the distance, I think they actually say in the book, the distance between Watership Down and Ephraphus, whatever it is like 3 miles. So not too far.
It also does a good job of doing the proper noun stuff, because there is a fine line between here are proper nouns and
okay, well, actually, it does an okay job, right? So in terms
it's not Tolkien.
Right. In terms of proper nouns, they use proper nouns the way a fantasy novel does, which is cool. And they also use proper nouns to refer to things that the rabbits see but don't know, right? So, like, the rabbits don't know what a train is, and they don't know what train tracks are, so that's the Iron Road, right? Or, the sun, they don't know about the sun or the fact that it's a star, right? So it's Frith is the sun, right? It's some god.
They have their mythology.
Right, there's a rabbit mythology, which is awesome. But on the other hand, the positive part about that is it brings you into the world of the rabbit, where it's like things the rabbits know and things the rabbits don't know, which is good. But when the rabbit says Iron Road, well, how does a rabbit know iron and has a rabbit know road? If you're a pet ant, it's going to bother you.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that was partly because, like, the author is very open. Unlike a lot of books we might talk about, the author of Watership Down, it was 100% open about how the book was written, why he wrote it, who he got to help him do his research, like when he learned about rabbits, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pretty much...
It wasn't a rabbit person to begin with who knew all this stuff, right?
Well, he knew a little bit, but he got some people to give him like check stuff out.
It was like a
and give
rabbit
him
expert
advice.
advising.
Yes.
Yeah. This book was only written in the 70s. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
It's not
But,
that old.
That's the thing. It's not that old, and yet it seems like a lot of people we know, especially artists, really, really, really strongly remember this book.
Well, I mean, I put it on the same level as in terms of popularity in our culture as like Last Unicorn, right? It's like I hear about it pretty much like just as often in nerd circles. So I sort of pair them together because they both have animals and they're both books with movies.
But I guess what I thought the language did well, like you're right, the iron thing, but at the same time, the author, like Richard Adams, was really clever in this one point that the whole book is from the perspective of the rabbits, and it's
not the whole book.
Well, yeah,
there are chapters here and there from different perspectives.
You get the outside perspective of like what the doctor did at the end and all that.
You get other perspectives in a chapter here and there. Wasn't there a bird chapter also? Maybe I'm trying to remember.
Do you remember any characters' names? I'm curious about that because you just read.
I
this
remember.
book.
Well, yeah, I just read it today.
I read it 8 months ago.
I mean, most of the characters' names are like not human names, right? Like Hazel's the main rabbit.
Yep.
And then like the thing is, some characters have multiple names, right? Like Bigwig, he has like 2 other names that he has, right? Which sort of also mean the same thing. So it's like characters have multiple names, and then there's the best character, which is the basically Rabbit Moses or Rabbit Hercules, which is or Rabbit King David, which is El Arayara, who's the best dude. Really, I just wanted to hear about him. I didn't care about the other rabbit.
Well, you did hear about him because the whole story is the creation of another myth of El Arayara.
Obviously.
Emily yells at me. I pronounce that differently every time I look at it.
Well,
but Emily
okay,
can
so
pronounce it well.
So if you look in the book, right, his name is basically like he is hated by the 1,000, right? So
for example, 1,000 enemies.
So the rabbits will often end each other's names with Ra, right? So like Hazel, they'll call other rabbits will be like Hazel Ra, right? So El or whatever, right? They end it with Ra, right? So Ra goes at the end. Elil is the word they use to refer to the 1,000 enemies of rabbits, right? And the middle part, the Arara part, it means 1,000, right? So it's like, or no, hated, I think, whatever. So it's like Elil, right? Herrera, Ra. So something like that. It's a combination of 3 words together fast. So it's hard to say, and the way they spell it is not make it easy.
But notice the structure of how we've got the story of like a clever rabbit who sort of picked up on something being wrong and decided to go do something different.
Clever rabbit.
Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of the rabbit stories that are in this book are really just rabbit so clever, and that's the best part because it's like
look
Bugs
at
Bunny.
what the story is. The stories all kind of blur together, and it's like this historical spoken word narrative. It's
Prince Rainbow.
Yep. So you've got this like cycle of history, this oration, this oratory history that they pass down, rabbit to rabbit over time. They don't write things down, except for the cult rabbits a little bit. So Fiver and Hazel together, especially Hazel does clever things and like totally wins in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that he's inspired by these stories that their storyteller tells and that he knows and remembered by heart. But at the same time, it's pretty obvious that, rabbits have very short lives, and he lived way longer than most rabbits in the end.
Yep.
And individual rabbits get forgotten very quickly.
Yeah, they don't have writing. They only have an oral tradition. So it's making a big statement about what humanity was like when we only had an oral tradition, right? All the clever rabbits that have ever existed, basically all their stories get exaggerated, simplified, and they basically all just become El Harira, whatever. They don't No one's going to remember Hazel. All the stories of Hazel are going to be stories of El Herrera.
Yep, exactly. So every clever rabbit becomes
that
El
I'm going to
Herrera.
pronounce differently every single time.
But also, it was done very cleverly. So all the stories, how we anthropomorphize animals? I'm amazed that Adams was able to lapinamorphize other stuff. Because remember the story about the king who was evil or whatever, and how he had all the lettuces and how the lettuces were the important treasure?
Yes.
It's like the rabbits describe what other people do in rabbit terms. Like lettuces, of course, that's the valuable thing, not gold. Lettuces.
What is gold to a rabbit?
That's like us in like Redwall, like that the mice like stealing gold from something. Like we anthropomorphize them.
Mm-hmm.
But Adam so consistently kept that perspective when he was looking through the eyes of the rabbits. Like I was really surprised by how cleverly and well done that specific aspect was. Everything was from like in terms of rabbits.
Yep. So the reason it took me so long to read this book is because shit was going down,
For 8 months.
for a long time. So I
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of time for reading or ways to prioritize reading. But more so, it's like while the book is not bad, it is good. There are many things I like about it. It lacked that thing that other books have where you read it and you just like need to keep reading. Oh my gosh, right? It's like if I get a Prince of Nothing book, at least all the ones so far, you read some and it's like even though you're going to fall asleep and close your eyes in this chapter and you're not going to be able to finish it, you can't help but continue reading. This book, I would read a chapter and I'd be like, while I was reading it, I'd be like, all right. I wasn't like upset or being like, this sucks, I hate this. But I'd close my Kindle and put it there and there would be no urge to like go pick it up again. There would be no, like when I got in bed the next day, I just completely forgot about it. I just grabbed my DS instead or something.
See,
it
one,
didn't
I guess
have
one,
the grabbiness.
One, I have
because I
rabbits.
didn't care too much
And
about
having
the characters.
rabbits, one of our rabbits, I think of him a lot like Hazel, because Moogie, the brown one, he's sort of like cautious but also clever. So he's the one where like in the morning, like I go out to like get like lettuces and things, and he'll like be hiding near the door to be ready to like sneak out into the hall. He's always trying to like bust into stuff and get into things and mess around.
So rabbits do.
So I was reading the book and I look up and I got a little rabbit right there doing rabbity things. So I think that pushed me to just read a lot faster. And two, the book's a really fast read, so I read the whole thing in like a few days.
Well, I mean,
so
I
it
did.
wasn't-
I pretty much read probably the last 80% of the book yesterday and today. Well, maybe 60%, but still, yeah, it's a very fast read.
Yep.
But, whenever I got to the parts where they were telling a story about, like, El Herrera and the cabbages and whatever,
Yeah.
that part was a part that was very grabby. I had to keep reading, and I basically never stopped in the middle of any of those stories. But I stopped reading, pausing in the parts about the regular rabbits because I just didn't care about them that much. Often, like, they pretty much really had 3 different stories sort of stuck together. The first story was escaping from the village where they sense danger. The village,
Warren?
The Warren, where they sense danger. That was story 1. Story 2 was the cult rabbits. And story 3 was battling with the
But see, there was
fascist
no
rabbits.
break in those. I don't think of them as separate stories because it also the book did a really good job of.
You could have divided the book into like
No,
part
but
1,
here's,
part
here's
2, part
why
3.
why it didn't and why it works better that way. They didn't go that far.
No.
And their journey was sort of this continuous journey. So there is no destination. In a typical human hero
Sure.
story, like the slog, the knee that breaks pulls 10 men down.
Yeah.
They have a destination. They're going to the coffers. That's their goal. There was no like place to get to. There was just now we're safe and we can eat things and not be as worried. But at the same time, like it's not like they thought of it from the same perspective of this is our new home. We're safe here now. They just kept rabbiting. So in the course of rabbiting, all these stories keep happening because there is literally no way to settle down unless you become one of these messed up Warrens.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, each of those 3 stories, though, right, was basically akin to like a sort of Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, social commentary kind of aspect, right? And that part is sort of like, yeah, I've read these stories like 100 times before.
But one, the author said that wasn't the case at all. It was just an exploration. Like there was no allegory or metaphor or anything.
Well, you failed at doing what you said you were doing.
No, because if you look, I think of
it
it more
totally
as
was.
it's like, well, what would rabbits be like if this happened? What would rabbits be like the cult rabbits? What are
Right.
wild rabbits that don't have to worry about food anymore?
Yeah, okay.
Like? What would
So-
they do?
so,
they start
okay.
developing writing and art and culture.
Right.
But
So
at the same time, they get kind of messed up.
in a
and they're not-
rabbit warren, right? The term they used for basically like the army was like the Ausla, right?
Yep.
But in the fascist rabbit colony, they had the secret rabbit police, which were the Auslaffe.
Yep.
That doesn't sound like a Nazi term to you?
Not really.
No, grammatically speaking.
Richard Adams talked about how the rabbit language, he made it up to be very huffy and like the kinds of noises and things that he associated with rabbits, and that is purely the sole reason the language sounds the way it does. That's why
if you don't want to make a
Erfafra.
metaphor for something, you should go out of your way to make it as far away as possible from.
Plus, I
the
mean,
thing.
yeah, pretty much any fascism at all will be able to be read as a metaphor for Nazis.
Obviously.
That's just how it goes. But at the same time, that Warren was very successful, except for the fact that Woundwort was fucking crazy.
Well, I mean, that's interesting about that character, right? Because at the same time as him being crazy, it like they took care to not just show him as like crazy evil bad guy, right? It's like he had a lot of positive qualities.
He was also a product of his upbringing.
Yeah. But it's like he had someone, it's like, yeah, he's a badass. He totally saved everybody. You know, it's like he has many good qualities.
But because he was basically
he just
not
took it too far.
Well, he was basically not a rabbit.
Right, and even when he had the chance towards the end, right, where Hazel was like, let's make a deal, right, we'll just send some of your people, make a new warren out in the middle part. He almost went with it.
Yep.
You know, but then he didn't because he was too far gone. But
But
if that had been a younger, of him, he might have said yes.
But when I'm reading, I was getting like that big scene at the end. I like Kihar a lot, and when Kihar's helping him out,
Bird is so good.
Bird, yeah.
Yeah.
I would, if I was gonna ship, I feel like Bigwig had a weird crush on Kihar because the other rabbits kept making fun of him, like, you really like that bird a lot. Why are you hanging out with him so much?
He was the one who was friends with the bird. What's the problem?
Yeah, but he was the one who was so skeptical of the bird in the beginning too.
That's always how it is.
Yep.
It's always how it is.
But then there were other little touches like that too. Like they had when they're on their way, like they had to fight with the rats at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, later, it implies that like rats have a similar thing going on and they can kind of communicate. Because remember when what's his name? I forget who was trying to get the dog to chase them back to the warren. He runs and hides in the barn, and the dog's coming after him, and the rats are like, just lay low, it's cool, dude. And he's like, no, I need the dog to chase me. And the rat's like, what the fuck?
What the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, another thing.
Woundwart's just like, it's just a bird. It's just a dog. And he fucking turns around and tries to fight that dog.
Yep.
And we know as humans that the dog just ate him and walked away with his body. Like, duh.
Yep.
But
probably took it back to the farm.
Yeah, but I love how they never found his body, so he also lives on forever.
Sure. There was one thing in this book is there was a Chekhov's gun, which was the little mouse they befriended, right? Because they befriended the mouse and then they befriended the bird. And the bird, basically Chekhov's gun went bam right away. It's like, well, this bird is basically a character now that's hanging out with you all the time.
Yep.
But the mouse was like, it's going to come back later. It's Chekhov's gun. It hasn't fired yet. And when it fired, it did fire, but it sort of fired meekly, which I was surprised
Well,
at.
it's a mouse.
Right, the
What do you
mouse.
expect?
Right, the mouse is just sort of like all he did in the end was warn them of a danger over the hill, which was significant.
Yeah.
Quite significant. But it wasn't like I expected like a whole bunch of little miceys to come out and get all over, the bad guys or
Well, I
something
guess
like that.
what's interesting is that the book kind of does it. You know how nerds like world building a lot? And there is a lot of world building. It's like rabbit society world building. Like you get a lot of this like sense of a world and the way rabbits are and everything. But at the same time, nerds like world building where they want it to be quote unquote realistic, like plausible. It has to fit. Like, why would that Game of Thrones character do this? Obviously, he'd just murder them all. And they love it when that kind of stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that the mice couldn't play a bigger role sort of fits with the fact that everything is plausible. I mean, the craziest thing that happens is when Fiverr's
getting in a boat and realizing they should bite the rope off.
well, that was clever. I'm talking about in the end where Fiverr's like, I had a dream that like you rode one of those Harudadoos and like came back to the farm, whatever. And then like that happens because the little girl just picks him up and like, okay.
Yeah, I like how sometimes he uses, when he makes up a proper noun, like Hrudadu, it's like any human being immediately knows they're talking about a car,
Yeah.
right? Because it sounds like a car. It's an onomatopoeia kind of situation. But some of the other proper nouns, they didn't do that, right? Like, if you don't know that Frith is the sun, it's going to take you a while to
figure it out pretty quick.
But it's not as obvious as Hrududu is a car. You see what I'm saying? There's no sort of this connection between the rabbit language and the human language.
But like the Prince of Nothing, where there's also no connection, it uses all those things consistently. And like when the rabbits have the different names for each other and things, like they're used consistently and they sort of just feel natural.
Yep.
It's the opposite of the Rothfussian model.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else to say about this book?
I mean, I think it's definitely worth reading. I get the impression that nothing else related to the book is worth pursuing except the movie. Like, I guess the continuing adventures or whatever are pretty rubbish.
I mean, like, it's not like I want to go back and unread it, but it's not like I would have regretted not reading it.
I like this book a lot more than you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but it's not like, it's not going to go on a favorite books list. I'm not going to read it again.
I'll put it up there. I could read it again someday.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I definitely could.
Okay. You can do that.
I also like the implications, especially around the cult rabbits. Like just the little things like you were talking about allegory for the advancement of humans, like from an oral tradition and those sorts of things, like what humans were like. Look at what happened to the cult rabbits. They started making a little bit of art and stuff, and they made a weird warren. And they made a social warren. And these rabbits did not understand. Like, I like that they lived, like, the Hazel could not understand. Like, he knew there was something important about the things they'd pressed into the walls, but he didn't get it. Like, he couldn't figure it out.
Nope.
A worse author would have made that happen more. But then they get the idea, and their warren, like, they advance, like, they civilize a little bit. Like, they make the bigger warren. Like, you see them evolve.
Yeah, they made the honeycomb
bit.
part.
Yeah.
Right? That they wouldn't have otherwise done. They're like, oh, that's a good idea from them, but we don't need to bother anything else from them.
Yep.
Because they're weird.
But in general, like,
But I like this part of the thing they did.
In all the things they figure out,
they
that
also
are not
bother
rabbity,
stuff from the fascists too, right? They
Yeah.
start sending the patrols out a little bit, right? Just for whatever reason, you know.
But it did a good job of letting them figure that stuff out and use it and evolve a little bit, but not figure it out too much to where it's not rabbity. Like when what's his name? The smart one. Who's the smart one? The one who figures out the rope, because he's looking at the boat and he's like, I think. Like he's looking at it.
Yeah,
that's
what I want to point out, right? So there's like the main rabbits, right? There's Hazel, Bigwig, Fiver, right? It's like the ones that you know that are really significant.
Yeah.
There seem to be a lot of rabbits that are sort of less significant, but still sort of important. Like I think there was like Strawberry and some of these other ones, right? But it's like you really can't. It's hard to tell them apart. Like they're basically all the same rabbit to me.
No, they all do. Most of them had pretty different personalities. Like
but like they were there. Like they didn't develop or focus on them enough for me to remember like which one was which.
So
it's like all I knew was whenever I saw one of those names, I'm like, oh, that's one of the names of one of the second tier rabbits. That's all.
I remembered them because they all had a role in the party. Like this one's the bard. This one's the
I couldn't remember what their roles were. So they were all just second tier rabbit to me.
All right, I'm curious because so
like Holly, second tier rabbit
in the Prince of Nothing. What is the name of any of the great names? Anyone?
I don't remember.
What is the name of the magic that the other people use? The Phantom.
Oh, I used to know. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Name any characters other than Hazel and Fiver and Bigwig.
I just said Holly. That's a rabbit.
One. You got one. You don't remember
know.
the name of the badass that was basically in irons that came out of her Fafra with them?
Oh, what's that guy's name?
Blackavar.
That guy's so awesome.
Yep.
I thought the Campione guy, whose name was obviously should have just been Champion.
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna do a traitor situation and turn on the Wart guy, but he didn't.
Yep.
But he still was okay in the end.
Well,
I thought he was going to go full turncoat and help the good guys.
No, instead he kind of backs off into like, let's just keep doing the smart stuff we're doing, but let the other people just leave because otherwise it's not working out.
Yep.
But I did also enjoy how the characters were all like no character did any of the stupid things that bother me in a lot of books or a lot of stories.
That's true.
Like When
That's
I
true.
first started reading, my immediate fear was that the initial plot was going to be Bigwig still wants to be like an important big boss rabbit, and he bosses Hazel around, and that's a conflict. I like how it skipped that 100%.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, people didn't trust Fiverr's crazy ramblings until they saw that they were true, so then they trusted them.
Yep, exactly.
And then it's okay.
Yep.
Everyone had the rabbits. This is why the main characters, that why you were rooting for them, because like they were the smart, common sense ones who listened to reason and had reason, and were and that's why they were the tricky rabbits, right? They were cleverer and smarter than the other ones.
Yep.
Whereas all the other ones were messed up in some way,
and it all
that's
fits
why
with
they failed.
what real rabbits are like, because the way rabbits work is that they make a lot of them, and only the lucky and clever ones keep making more of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of evolve toward always being clever and making more of themselves as fast as possible. And the story is sort of just like set around all that.
Well, also because rabbits are that way in the real world that we live in, when people write stories about rabbits, and they will often lead to a rabbit as a tricky character.
Yep.
Right? Same way that you will lean as like, if you were making something about like a loyal army of something, you would pick dogs, right? Stuff like that.
So yeah, I really like this book.
Or people make like the wise old god whale. No one makes the wise old god starfish. That doesn't happen.
What about boa juice?
It's different. I'm just saying, right? It's like different animals in the real world have different personalities and traits, so that when stories are written, people will pick animals to go with matching traits. You don't see mismatches like that. It's not, I don't know, grasshopper guard, okay? No one's doing that.
Yeah, but like Redwall, there's not very mousy.
No. But you get, Bugs Bunny, you don't see, it's not the clever, imagine if Daffy Duck had Bugs Bunny's personality, he was always getting away with shit, and Bugs was the one who was getting shot. It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense for a duck to be so smart and always tricking the hunter. Right?
Well, I mean, ducks never win Stanley Cups, so of course.
I'm just saying, it wouldn't make sense, right? So it's the same reason that rabbits are chosen here, to be smart.
But the book seems deserving of the fact that it's so well known.
It is well known.
And I really liked it.
If you like rabbits or adventures, you should read it, because it won't take you that long if you actually spend if you actually try.
It'll either take you 3 days or 8 months.
Yep. Something like that. The next book will probably take you 8 months, even if you read it every day.
You know what, Scott? I wouldn't pick The Count of Monte Cristo, but I will tell you now.
Some Ulysses, you're going to go even harder?
No. There is a fantasy book
that I don't know.
Written by 2 mediocre fantasy authors together. They're both famous in their own right.
Why would you pick something mediocre?
The book is almost 3 inches thick.
Okay.
I read the first 2/3 of it.
Why?
Because when I was younger, I just had this idea of if I could get past
But I mean, I'm picking something that at least has some legit reason.
Yeah, this book, these are famous authors, and people like them, but the same kinds of people like
Is it your
Ready
friend
Player
R.A.
One.
Salvatore and someone else?
No, God, no. No. That was the first book ever that I had started reading, made it more than 1/3 of the way through, and still decided to quit at some point before the end. I never read the last 200 pages.
So you want to pick it so that I'll have to read the full thing and you'll only have to read 200 pages?
That depends entirely on how much I enjoy or do not enjoy.
I can't have no control over that. I don't even have control over whether I'm going to enjoy it. It just has a significant place in nerd culture, and I think it is worth investigating.
Yeah, but you could say the same thing based on current nerd culture about Ready Player One. And there's literally no reason to give that book a second look.
This has passed a greater test of time.
I think it's being largely forgotten. I think only
So is Game of Thrones if there wasn't suddenly a TV show.
Well, actually,
it's in the same place Game of Thrones was in.
I've read a lot of increasing articles and sentiment that the Game of Thrones TV is actually taking the questionable parts of Game of Thrones and making them not just questionable, but just bad and misogynistic and fucked up.
Well, it's bad and fucked up to begin with. So.
No, there's a bunch of bad things happen to characters.
If Game of Thrones had never had a TV show made of it, I still would. And I went to that bookstore and I had the same thoughts about picking a long fantasy series. I still would not have picked Game of Thrones because of its reputation and what I knew about it.
All I knew
But
about
I have
it,
seen these books on the shelves of trusted nerds.
I think always
Not
thought Game of Thrones
untrusted
was like
nerds.
Lost. It's going nowhere, and the end won't be satisfying. Of course, The Prince of Nothing might not be going anywhere.
That's true.
If those books don't go anywhere, I don't know what I'll do.
But The Wheel of Time, the author is dead. So,
The author is dead in all works of literature.
no, literally, though.
Oh, yeah.
So there's someone else who took over, but I don't think you have to read those ones.
I'm worried that this is going to be a slog.
It is quite possible.
Scott, my knee's going to
I'm
break.
I'm not denying it. You don't see me saying it's not going to be. I'm saying I chose it despite the same worries that you have.
I'm never making it to the coffers.
Every apprehension you have, I also have, but I venture forth regardless.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geeknights is not one, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.